Bible reading is coming from the book of Psalms, chapter 10, verse 12 through 18. Arise, O Lord, O God, lift up your hands, forget not the afflicted. Why does the wicked renounce God and say in his heart, you will not call to account? But you do see, for you know mischief and vexation, that you may take it into your hands. To you the helpless commits himself. You have been the helper of the fathers. Break the arm of the wicked and evildoer. Call his weakness to account till you find none. The Lord is king forever and ever. The nation perished from his own land. O Lord, you hear the desires of the afflicted. You will strengthen their heart. You will incline your ear to do justice to the fatherless and the oppressed, so that the man who is of the earth may strike terror no more. This was a good prayer. Lord, thank you for this day. Bless the word as we heard by everybody. And bless somebody else today. Amen.
If you will step back to your feet, join with us in the goodness of God. I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up If you are our guest, thanks for being here. And I usually have a connection card. I do have one. If you are our guest, please take a moment, fill one of these out. There should be one on the back of the pew in front of you or at the back table. Fill it out. We would love to see how we can better minister to you. And please do that before you leave. And you have a double treat today, guys. The first treat is you don't have to listen to me preach. The second treat is you get to listen to my friend preach. Today with us, we've got Dr. Umphrey. He is a PhD graduate from Southern Seminary, which is the best school on the planet. I'm a fellow graduate. He is a professor at Emmaus Theological Seminary and University of the Cumberlands. And he is, I've known him for over 20 years, and he is my mentor. And all of those things are pretty cool. But even greater than that, he's my friend. He's my best friend. And I'm honored to have him and Katrina and baby Zelda here with us today. So welcome him. He doesn't get a lot of applause, and we don't applaud a lot. We give him applause today.
It should be on. Back up to the back a little higher though.
Okay.
It should be good.
All right. I had this straightened out, and my daughter twisted it. So if it's broken, you can blame her. Well, good morning, First Baptist Riverdale. It's great to be here. I've heard a lot about you over the past couple of years. And Ronnie and I, as he's already said, we've been close friends for a long time. And our friendship has been through a lot of territory, and there was a time in our friendship that I never thought I would be preaching at Ronnie's Baptist church that he was pastoring. And some of you that know Ronnie's story, you might understand where I'm coming from there. But it's absolute just pleasure and honor to be here today, and just count Ronnie and Geneva and Emmett among our just dearest friends, and to be able to share is just tremendous. Turn with me to Acts chapter 15. Ronnie, he keeps me abreast of what he's preaching, and when I remember, I try to listen in to what he's been preaching. And I know he's in the Gospel of Mark now, but he's recently been in doing Essential Church series. And I thought I might piggyback off of sort of some things that he said recently, and share some things about what it means to be in the life of the church. And I do teach New Testament and other things. I'm also a pastor in Columbus, Ohio. I'm the pastor of Pillar Church. Been there for 8 years, and I've been in ministry a long time. I pastored in Tennessee. I served as a director of missions. They call them AMSs, Association of Mission Strategists now. I served in Kentucky as a AMS for a couple of years. So I've seen a lot of church life. I've seen established church life. I've seen church plant life. I've seen what it looks like in various contexts. And every church is different. And every church is the same. We have, at a high level, we have the same mission. We have, many times, the same problems. But we're all different because sometimes they just take different forms. And our context is different. Our people are different. But I want to talk about, honestly, just some of the same things today. And I might share a few stories. I don't usually tell a lot of stories, but I might share some in as much as they're helpful. But Ronnie recently preached about the church in Acts, and I know he recently preached about the story of Paul and Barnabas. I kind of want to take that and move forward a little bit and talk about maybe what happens after Paul and Barnabas. So let's read here in Acts chapter 15. Let's begin in verse 36, and let's read this story. And after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us return and visit the brothers in every city where we proclaim the word of the Lord and see how they are." Now Barnabas wanted to take with them John called Mark, but Paul thought best not to take with them one who had withdrawn from them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. And there arose a sharp disagreement, so that they separated from each other. Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and departed, having been commended by the brothers to the grace of the Lord. And he went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. And what I want to look at today is that we have the same mission, an unchanging mission. We go through new chapters. And when you understand the concept of seasons, you're better equipped to face life. There was a young man one time, and he was a little boy, and you know how little children are. They get told no. They don't understand things. They don't want to listen to their parents. And the little boy said, well, when I'm a teenager, I'll be able to do what I want, and then maybe eventually get a driver's license. I can do what I want, and then I'll be where I want to be. Then he turns into a teenager. Things not exactly what he thinks. He said, well, when I turn 18, I'll be my own man. I'll do my own thing. Maybe I'll go to college or get out from under mom and dad. Then he turns 18. He says, man, as soon as I finish college, I'm going to get a job, have my own money. I'm going to see the world. I'm going to do what I want. Then he gets out of college, and all of his friends are getting married and having kids. And he says, well, as soon as I get a family. Then he gets a family, and he says, as soon as I get a promotion and I get that 2-car garage and all of these things, then I'll be okay. Then the kids start growing up, and bills and bills and bills, and they go to college. And he says, as soon as I get these kids out of the house and retire, I'm going to live life. And one day he becomes older, and he looks back and he says, somewhere along the way, I have missed it all. And as people, I think we can all relate to that. And a couple years ago, I went over a huge benchmark. I graduated from Southern Seminary with my PhD on December the 9th, 2022, I believe it was. That was also my 40th birthday. And so it kind of softened the blow a little bit because it was a really cool day, but it was also like, oh, man. And I'm learning what seasons look like. You change somewhat. You're the same person, but the way you see things change. Your experience change. The same thing is true in the life of the church. And in the life of the church, we have to understand seasons. Our mission never changes. The mission is the same. Every church mission statement should look similar. We might phrase it a little differently, but it's got something to do with loving God, loving your neighbor, and sharing the gospel and reaching the world. Every church mission statement should look something like that. But the way we carry it out, sometimes we call it our vision. It just changes through the years. Our community changes. Our resources change. Our church changes. You take a young church that's just planted, and maybe you start scrappy. You look at a lot of our church plants today, you start with just a few people, very little money. Maybe you're meeting in a school or you're meeting in some shared space, and then you start reaching people. And the season is evangelism. We got to reach our community. We got to reach our community. And you go out and you reach people. People are getting saved. People are getting baptized. The church grows. And then you build a building. And then you get bills. And then some people in the church start getting older, and you start having like pastoral care. People are in the hospitals more. You have funerals. You have weddings. And then you shift into a season where it's not so much focused on evangelism, although you should never get away from it. You get into a season where you're kind of turning internal. You're ministering to the church. And here's what happens. We can turn so internal we forget our mission. But what you begin to do is you have to say in these seasons what is next and what is God calling us to. And if we are in the present and we're always looking to the past, to some former day that we remember, we're going to miss out on what God has now. If we're in the present and we're always looking to the future and say, well, when we get this done, we'll be able to do something, right? When we get, more people, we'll be able to do more. If you're in the present and you're always looking to the past, if you're in the present and you're always looking in the wrong way to the future, you're going to miss what God is doing today. So I want to take a look here and see kind of how the church here had to look at what was going on in the day. And when you look at the present, it's painful. I think sometimes we look to the past because it's a coping mechanism. We don't like the change. We don't like what's happening, and we want to go back. But you can't go back. This just doesn't work. It's not there anymore. Maybe the present is painful, and you think, well, if we get over what's going on, we get into the future, we'll be able to breathe. That might not come. It might not materialize. We have to lean into what God is doing now, even if it's painful, even if it's different, even if it's challenging. So I want to take a look at some things and just reinforce this idea of the same mission, but new chapter, a new season. First thing I want to notice is that conflict can arise during a new phase of the mission. And so look at the text here. So this takes place after Paul and Barnabas' first missionary journey. And they had some rocky times, but they had some great victories. And after some time, they come back. They're at Antioch, at the church at Antioch. And Paul comes to Barnabas and said, let's go back and let's return and visit the brothers in every city where we proclaim the word of the Lord and see how they are. Now I want you to notice, it's the same mission. They went out to reach the lost and to plant churches. But part of planting churches is you want to plant healthy churches. And you don't want to reach people for Christ and then leave them to the wolves. You've got to disciple them. So this is a new phase in the mission. We've reached these people. We've planted these churches. We're doing the same mission, but it's the next phase. We've got to go make sure they're healthy and make sure they're on solid ground. If it were not for the fact that many of these early churches were so unhealthy, you wouldn't have half of your New Testament. The book of Galatians is written to a church that had forgotten the gospel and had went back to Judaism. The book of 1 Corinthians is written to a church that was so out of order. They had sexual immorality in the church. Church members were suing each other. They were having disordered church services. Paul even says the Lord has put some of you in an early grave because you're so out of order, and He's taking you out. Then you just go down the list and look at the churches. Philippians is known as one of the most joyous, unifying letters, but even the Philippians had a unity issue in their church. They had conflict. And if you just go down the list, these early churches, sometimes we think if we can go back to the early church, we'll be better. And the early church does give us a template, but the early church had problems. It had heresies. It had dysfunction. Satan loves to see this in the church. But in any case, conflict can arise during a new phase. And so Paul says it's the next phase of our mission, our second missionary journey. Our first one was one of evangelism. Our second one is going to be one of strengthening. And so Barnabas wanted to take with him John called Mark. But Paul thought it best not to take him because he had withdrawn from them in Pamphylia. He had not gone with them to the work. And there arose a sharp disagreement, and they separated from each other. And so what you see here is John Mark had gone on the first missionary journey. And I know Ronnie talked about this recently, so I'm not going to dwell on John Mark a whole lot, but I just want to touch base on it. He had gone with them, and when they had some conflict, some spiritual warfare, John says, all right, I'm out. I'm going back home. And he went back home to Mom and said, I'm done. Barnabas, the encourager, when it comes time to go on the second missionary journey, he's like, I think we can work on Mark. I think we can get him where he needs to be. He's not where he needs to be, but we can get him there. And Paul's like, if you're going to do this work, you've got to be there. And people have debated over the years who was right, Paul or Barnabas. I think it's a complicated question. I think at the end of the day, Paul's right, but I think Barnabas had some good things he was doing too. You have Paul who was saying, this work is so important, we can't have people bailing out. Have you ever been on a job somewhere and somebody quits and they don't give any notice and you're just having to work extra hours and you're having to pick up where they've dropped it? Or maybe you're working with somebody and they're lazy and they don't do their job and you've got to do their job for them? It's hard. It's hard. We don't know what Mark's role was, but maybe it was some kind of a support. Maybe he was doing something important and he just left them in a lurch. And Paul says this work is too important to have somebody that's unstable. And Barnabas says, yeah, but the Lord's using Mark and he just needs to grow. And you can see how you can kind of identify with both people a little bit. Conflict can arise during a new phase of the mission. I told Ronnie I was going to meddle today. I was kidding. I'm not going to meddle. I'm going to preach. But, Pastor Ronnie has been here for a couple of years now, almost 2 years. And in ministry life, that's just getting started, right? So ministry moves slow. But no, he's been here for 2 years, and thank God for it. He's done so much great work. But many times when a new pastor comes, it's different, right? You got to get to know him. And I've known Ronnie a lot of years. He's weird. It takes a longer time to get to know him. He's going to make me sit down now. I kid. I love this family. You've got a precious family here. But there may be a season that you're like, we got to get to know this new guy. We got to find out what he wants to do. And we got to kind of come together and work. And so you got if you can think of it this way, maybe you have, if you think of First Baptist Riverdale being red and Ronnie being blue, you got to come together and you got to make purple, right? You got to come together. And now we got to change and he's got to learn us, but it's a new chapter. And we got to lean into what God is doing in the present. And sometimes this just causes confusion, lack of communication, these sorts of things. Every ministry position I've come into, there's been that kind of rocky transition. We got to do something different. We don't want to do it too fast and upset too many people, but we got to do things that are different. And sometimes it's really jarring. Now, there's a lot going on here. I don't think Barnabas is like, I don't want to change and do the second phase of the mission. I think he's on board there. I think there's the conflict is around how it's going to get done. This second missionary journey, it's continuing the mission. Barnabas says, yes, let's do it. It's strengthening the churches. Barnabas says, yes, let's do it. And another thing they're going to do is they're going to deliver the message of the Jerusalem Council. So in chapter 15, this issue of, do we circumcise people that are saved if they're not Jews? They had to settle that. One of the things they were going to do, they were commissioned to do, was to go out to all these churches and be like, hey, we had a conference about this. You don't have to go back to Judaism. You just need to love Jesus and do the fundamentals. So they've got important work to do. But the issue is how, what, and who. So, the conflict here, and this is important to notice, it's easy when conflict is like black and white. It's easy if somebody gets up and denies that Jesus is Lord. You're like, yep, that's wrong. We got to deal with that. It's easy sometimes when someone is in rank immorality. You're like in 1 Corinthians, someone's in this sexual immorality, they won't repent. You're like, yep, we got to do church discipline. We got to deal with that. But a lot of times, Satan comes between people who agree, who are typically together. They don't have a moral disagreement. They don't have a theological disagreement. They don't even have a missiological disagreement. But there's something personal. There's something that Satan just uses beyond that to divide us. And First Baptist Riverdale, you can be one of two kinds of people. Every one of you in here have your own opinions. Every one of us has our own opinions. I tell my church, you don't have to agree with me. I'm the pastor. You don't have to agree with me on everything. Because if I enforced that everybody would agree with me on everything, it would be me and Katrina and Zelda. And some Sundays, it would just be me. We've got to have room to recognize that we're not all going to agree on everything. We've got to agree on the gospel. We've got to agree on the truth. But here's the thing. You can be one of two kinds of people. You can be one that says, here is what we have in common. We are family. Or you can be the kind of person that says, here's the stuff I disagree with you on. And we need to be the first kind that says we're a family and we're going to focus on that. And the things we differ on, we're going to figure that out. And if that means I don't get my way, then I don't get my way. If that means that maybe you don't get your way sometime, you don't get your way. But we've got to value each other more than we value our preferences, more than we value even our tradition. Well, this is the way we've always done it. Well, does the Bible say we have to do it that way? Then it's negotiable, right? I've known churches that say, this is the way you have to worship, this is the way you have to do church. And it's a good church, and they're a thriving church, they're a happy church. But up the road is another good church, a thriving church, a happy church, and they don't do it that way. So you know what that tells me? You don't have to do it that way. You can, you don't have to. We have to be able to determine what is tradition. We have to determine what is for our comfort. Maybe I like to do it this way because I'm comfortable. I don't like to change stuff. I wish nothing ever changed. Change is traumatic, change is hard, change you have to learn something else. I'm 42 years old, and some of you are like, man, you're a kid. But like, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. Like, I'm at the point now, I don't want to have to download another app on my phone and learn how to do it. I'm about sick. Like, honestly, like you go to a restaurant, like, do you have our app? I just want food. I mean, you feel me? Like, you buy a new TV, you got to have an account for it. I just want to turn it on and watch it. So I've got some of the old, I got some of the new, On the other hand, don't give me a piece of paper, email me. So I'm kind of like inconsistent. I'm inconsistent. But we got to be able to be uncomfortable if it's going to help the mission. We got to lay our preferences aside. And here's the thing, we got to lay personality aside. What do I mean by that? Sometimes in 1 Corinthians, you have people who are like, well, I like Paul, I like Peter, I like, Apollos. Sometimes there's this thing of chemistry, there's this thing of personality. Like, our personality just doesn't jive exactly. Sometimes you just got to lay that aside and just know, hey, we're different people. I'm from Tennessee, just like the McDowells are, And the Lord called us to Ohio, and I'm just going to tell you, people in Ohio are different than they are down here in the South. Y'all know that? Like in Tennessee, you flash a smile and you talk about, you find common ground and find out, oh, my dad knew your dad, and you're good. People are like, oh, Ray, he's all right. You go up to Ohio, you have to earn credit with those people. You can't just go up there and charm them. It's different. And it took me a while to figure it out. There was a chemistry issue when we went there. I had to figure those folks out, and they had to figure me out. I had one guy said, you coming from Tennessee, we thought you were going to come up here with no shoes on, But now how does this tie in with Barnabas and John Mark and Paul? They're not necessarily dealing with comfort issues or tradition issues. They are dealing with a personal issue. John Mark is a nephew to Barnabas. He's family. And I think Barnabas, I think he's leaning. I think he's biased. I think he's got a point. I think he's coming from a good place. I think he's wanting to bring this young man along. He's wanting to mentor him. He's wanting to give him another chance. Paul's like, this is too dangerous. You can kind of see where these guys are about 49, 51%. Like you see, okay, they're kind of there. But folks, let me tell you, we've got to be able to figure out how to be together. I kind of think the conversation should have been like this. I'm just going to be honest. I think Paul says, I've got some genuine concerns here about our safety, about getting the work done. I think Barnabas could come along and say, you know what, I kind of get that. Can we find a middle way? Maybe can we bench him this time? Maybe bring him next time? But it got to the point that they wouldn't give. Barnabas wouldn't give. They wouldn't give. And what Satan likes to do, these seasons oftentimes come with seams. You want to see these seasons blend to each other, but seasons come with seams. I'm not just picking on Ronnie today, but a huge seam is you call a new pastor. Like he wasn't here last Sunday. He's here now, and he's sticking around. That's a sharp transition. At our church, we recently sold our building. That's a big seam. That's a big, juncture point. Satan likes to get in. I know it's a long story. I'm not going to tell you our story, but you can ask me after and I'll share it with you. But you have these seams that are like, okay, it's not smooth. It's not a ramp. It's a huge jump. What Satan likes to do is he likes to use those seams. So this is the seam between the first missionary journey and the second. And what Satan likes to do is to take those seams and make them division points. He does. Because it's a jump. And what happens is you get to that seam, you get to that sort of a rough patch, and you got some people that are already disgruntled about stuff, and they use that as just a point to jump off. They use that as a point to just be like, you know what? I'm not going. Satan likes to use those kind of rocky seams to let that be the place where people separate. And they'll say, well, I just didn't like that change. I didn't like that change. And what it boils down to is there was actually something else. And that was just a convenient jumping off place. I think there's more going on here with the John Mark issue. There's a seam in the mission. There's a shift in the mission. It's a different season. There's a little bit of conflict that's already there. And Satan just leans into that and presses. First Baptist Riverdale, he does it at Pillar Church, and he'll do it here. We've got to be able to recognize those seams and say it's going to be a bump, but we're getting through it together. Next, the mission must remain our guiding principle. The mission. So Barnabas took Mark with him, sailed away to Cyprus. Paul chose Silas and departed, having been commended by the brothers to the grace of the Lord, and he went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. Notice this, the mission was to go back and strengthen the existing churches. And who ends up doing that? Paul. Now notice here, separation and sending. Barnabas sailed away. Notice, he took Mark and they sailed away. But Paul and Silas were commended by the church and sent. At our church, we have something that we do, and it's one of my favorite things I started doing. When we have people that leave our church, and they leave like maybe to go serve somewhere else, or they go off to seminary. We've even had people that have just said, hey, we want to reach our community. So when I came to, our church was called Briggs Road Baptist. We were on Briggs Road. So when we left Briggs Road and we moved to a new location, we couldn't be Briggs Road anymore, so now we're Pillar Church. And so anyway, but we have people at our church. The community had changed. When the church was planted in the 60s, it was kind of maybe kind of a blue-collar working community, but it was a new community that was built. A lot of people transitioning in from the south of places. Over time, that changed, and the community changed. It was different. A lot of the old homes were sold. A lot of them became rental properties. We had a lot of crime. We had a lot of different stuff. And what happened is a lot of people that lived there, they moved out. So we have people in our church that have moved out 5 miles away. Some moved out 10 miles away. Some of them moved out 20 or 30 miles away, but they were still coming. And we had a few people still in the community. So we had this sort of constellation of people, and we're driving in. And a lot of them, we had one family come in an hour away because they had a legacy connection there, but they moved away. We had a family, it was during COVID, and they're snowbirds. They go down south. And I already have a chip on my shoulder against those people because I'm stuck up here in the cold north, all down there on the beach. And they came back, and I got a phone call. And they've been members of our church for 45 years, since they were like teenagers. They got married young. And they said, Pastor Ray, we just want you to know that, we're not going to be coming back to Briggs Road Church at the time, Briggs Road. And they said, we're going to be going to a church in our community. And I'm like, all right. And they were old-time folks, and I thought, they don't like my preaching, they don't like the changes I've made, or they don't like how I've handled COVID. And I said, you're not going anywhere until you come and sit down with me and talk. You've been here too long to leave over a phone call. So they come in, and my guns are loaded. I know that they've got something under their saddle, and they're mad. And I'm like, I'm going to straighten them out. So they come into my office, and I say, look, you got to tell me what's going on, because this story is not the real story. And the husband, he broke down in my office, and he said, Pastor Ray, he says, I will tell you it's your fault that we're leaving. I'm like, okay, here we go. He says, ever since you came to our church, you've been telling us to reach our community. He says, we've been having block parties, we've been having back to school bash, and we've been coming and reaching our community. And he says, but I realize we live 45 minutes away. He says, and we're not reaching our community. And he said, Pastor Ray, we've got family that live close to us. He said, they won't drive 45 minutes to our church. He says, we got lost neighbors that won't come to our church. And he says, it's through your preaching and teaching and discipleship that we realize that we need to reach our community, but this is no longer our community. And he says, there's a church in our area. He says, their church just burned down. And he says, we want to go in our community and help that church rebuild and reach our neighbors for Christ. I'm like, wow. So you know what we did? We brought them up in front of the church on our last Sunday, and we prayed over them, and we sent them out. They still come back for like funerals and things, and we talk. They were out of a pastor for a while. They came to me and said, do you know anybody who could be our pastor? And the man, he's a deacon at the church now. They're thriving. We have a great relationship. And so we started with that. And when somebody leaves our church, maybe they move away, and it's something like that, we bring them up and pray over them. But do you know what happens, though? When folks don't leave for the mission, when they're not being sent, they don't want to do that. They just go. And it makes a marked difference. I'm not doing that to shame people. I'm doing it to celebrate what's right. And when people go for those reasons, we want to send them. So you got people who are sent, and you got people who sail away. And I don't say that to try to throw aspersions on anybody or any situation, but we do need to know the difference. Because one is in line with the mission, and the other is in line with preferences and self. So now what happened? I don't want to talk so much about Barnabas and John Mark. I want to talk more about Silas and Luke and Timothy. Now look what happens. Paul chose Silas and departed. Who is Silas? He had been a leader at the Jerusalem council. So they're going to go take the news of the Jerusalem council to these churches. Silas had been a leader in that, in ironing out the theology of how we're going to deal with these Gentile churches. We read in Acts 15 that he had actually risked his life for Jesus. Now we don't know what he did, but there was a way. Paul says that the people said that he had actually risked his life somehow for Jesus. Now contrast that with Mark, who said, I'm going home. We find out that he's spiritually gifted to be a prophet. And we also find out later in the chapter that Silas is a Roman citizen. As they go into further and further and further into Gentile territory, into Greece, that Roman citizenship is going to be really, really important. Silas sticks with Paul through Syria, Asia Minor, Macedonia, which is modern-day Greece, Thessalonica, modern-day Greece, and Corinth. We find out that Silas becomes a co-author of 3 of Paul's letters and of this Jerusalem letter that's sent out to everybody. Silas has a ministry resume. He has a track record. He's proven, and he has special gifts, and he has special opportunities in his life that are going to make him especially useful in this new leg of the journey. What you see here happening, you see this division happen. But I want you to notice how it's the sovereignty of God. Ephesians 1:11 says that God predestines everything after the counsel of his will. And you know what I have to say? Sometimes when we go through a rocky patch, I have to say this is the sovereignty of God. He's leading us to it. And sometimes I fight it kicking and screaming. I'll tell you what, about January in Ohio, I'm like, I don't know if God's sovereign or not. I'm mad. I hate the snow. I'm kidding. But the snow won't melt, and we're in Columbus, and snow in the country is different than snow in the city. Snow in the city, they pile it up, it gets nasty, it gets great, it never goes away. Snow banks up until March and April. But God's sovereign, and he has this southern guy who wants to be on the beach somewhere up in Ohio for a reason. And I said, Lord, you're sanctifying me somehow. Let me know when you're done. But here's the thing. I believe that God is sovereign. And you see that in hindsight more than you see it ahead of time. You see it in hindsight more than you see it in the present. I've gone through stuff, I'm like, Lord, how in the world are you using this? And I get back and I'm like, I see. And you think after we do that enough, we'd figure it out. We don't. We're like the children of Israel. Where's the bread? Where's the water? Where's the money? Where are the people? Are we guided by the mission? Are we trusting God? But notice what's happening. It's painful. It doesn't make us happy. But God has taken Barnabas and John Mark off the team. But look who he's putting on the team. Now this is not a matter of they're so much better. It's a matter of God is actually doing something with surgical precision, that he's preparing the journey for the next step. They're going to go further into Gentile territory. Barnabas and John Mark were godly Jewish young men, but they did not have that Gentile overlap. Paul was a Roman citizen. Silas is a Roman citizen. They're very educated and learned in the Greek culture, and they're going to be going further. We have to trust God. You remember the story of Gideon? We tell it to our children. Now Gideon went with his 30,000 men, and God whittled it down, and how many did they wind up with? 300. Man, if I was Gideon, I'm a warrior. I'd be like, all right, I'm done. There's no way, Lord. But God got it to where he wanted to so that he got the glory. I have learned this. So at our church established in the 60s, our church went through a journey. Before I got there, they went through some financial hardship. They had built this building. It was more than they needed, and they went into debt. When I got there, they still had $1 million in debt, and we were barely keeping up with the debt, barely keeping up with the maintenance on the building. And it got to the point that we realized what we need to do is we need to start over. And we relaunched. We changed the name, sold the building. We're meeting somewhere else, and we're looking for the next thing. And it's been a good season for us. It's been a good season for us. But it's been a difficult season. But what I have seen at every, and I don't have time to go into detail. I'm not here to tell a bunch of stories. But every obstacle we have encountered has actually been an opportunity. It has been God goading us, and every difficulty has actually moved us closer, and God is using it for his glory, and it's amazing. But I have this thing, I'm a warrior. I have this thing, I'm a warrior. If something little happens, I'm going to worry about that little thing. If something bigger than that happens, I'm going to worry about it. But let's think about it. If worries are like animals, here's a metaphor. If worries are like animals, and you got like this really mean dog, I'm like, oh man, I'm worried about that dog, he's going to bite me. And then you bring it up a little bit more, and maybe you're like I was one time when I was a kid, and I got into the cattle field, and this bull charged me. I got over the fence just in time. Oh man, I'm worried that bull's going to get me. But you amp that thing on up to like a grizzly bear, I'm not worried anymore. I'm just dead. Nothing to worry about. I'm dead. Either God's going to kill this bear and he's going to do a miracle, or I'm dead. And that's what I do. I worry until it gets so big, and I'm not worried anymore, because I'm either dead or God's going to do it. And we've got to be able to trust God, not just with a grizzly bear, but with the little things. And with just the little things, but with the big things. Now, God whittled Gideon down. He will whittle us down. He will get us where we need to go. The next thing is this. God will send workers when we are on mission. So God's already put Silas on the team. Look in chapter 16. Paul, they're on their second journey now. Paul came to Derbe and Lystra, and there was a disciple there named Timothy, the son of a Jewish woman who was a believer, but his father was a Greek. Again, you got a young man, a godly young Jewish man who knows the Bible, but he's also got that Greek context. God is putting a new team together. He was well spoken of by the brothers at Lystra and Iconium. Paul wanted Timothy to accompany him, and he took him and circumcised him because of the Jews who were in those places, for they all knew that his father was a Greek. As they went on their way through the cities, they delivered to them for observance the decisions that had been reached by the apostles and elders who were in Jerusalem. So the churches were strengthened in the faith, and they increased in numbers daily. Lystra was where Paul on his first journey was stoned and left for dead, and now he gets there and God's raised up some team members for him. Timothy's well spoken of. He's a son of a Jewish woman and a Greek father. He's living in the two worlds, just like Silas and Paul. He was a little more Greek than he was Jewish, apparently, because he hadn't been circumcised. Even though they're going around telling folks you don't have to be circumcised to be saved, Paul takes Timothy and says, you know what, this will give you more credibility on the mission. So, I mean, can you imagine this guy? I don't know, he's 28, 30 years old, young man. Yikes. But he did it for the mission. So you have a man who is committed to the mission literally against his own comfort. I mean, that's serious. He's got skin in the game. Sorry, that was... But he does. He's a third-generation believer. He's familiar with the Scriptures. We find out in 2 Timothy, Paul says, you know the Scriptures, and he's well spoken of. God is putting together, through his sovereignty, a super team. No shade toward Barnabas. No shade toward Mark. But God is putting together some A-star guys on Paul's team. Timothy would become a vital member of Paul's inner circle. Paul mentions him constantly in his letters. He calls him his son. Timothy comes on board with Silas. They get paired together and they help Paul. Paul leaves for Athens, and Silas and Timothy stay behind and are working together in Berea. They later will join Paul in Corinth. Silas, we don't read much about him toward the end of the book of Acts, but we do read in Peter's letter when Peter is at Rome in 1 Peter, which is toward the end of Peter's life. Silas is there with him. I don't know when he got on Peter's team, but Silas was faithful to the mission. Even when he changed teams, he was faithful to the mission. God has put together just a great team for Paul. Paul is a flexible missionary. He would be a Jew to the Jews. He'd be a Gentile to the Gentiles. Paul is prioritizing the mission. But then there's another team member. Here in chapter 16, verse 10. They're about to go to a different area, up to Iconium, but they see a vision. And when Paul saw the vision, immediately, look in verse 10, immediately we sought to go on to Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. Macedonia is like the eastern part of modern-day Greece. They're going literally into Greece. They're going into pagan central. They're going to end up going to Athens. I mean, just where all the paganism is. They're going to end up in later chapter 16 going to Philippi, which was a city in Macedonia. When they get to Philippi, you know what happens? They get there. Every city they've gone to has had a Jewish synagogue in it. You remember that? They always go to the Jewish synagogue, stir things up real good there, and then go preach to the Gentiles. You know what happens when they get to Philippi? There is no Jewish synagogue. The second missionary journey becomes uniquely Gentile. And God has put together a team of people who are equipped to do what? Reach the Gentiles. God has removed some of these solely Jewish-minded people, which, again, this is not a racial thing. It's just God's putting together the right team at this season. As they go into a place where there's not even a Jewish synagogue. You've got Silas, who's a Roman citizen. You got Timothy, whose dad's a Greek. And you got Paul, a Jewish and a Roman citizen. But notice something key here. When Paul had seen the vision, immediately, there's an important word there, we. Y'all know who writes the book of Acts? It's Luke. Up until now, in the gospel of the book of Acts, it's been them or they. They did this. They did this. Paul did this. This is the first occurrence of the word we. What does that mean? That means that Luke joins the party here. And from now on, you're going to read we up until the end of the book. So here in verse 10, Luke joins the party. Now, who's Luke? Well, he's the beloved physician. He's a doctor. Don't you think it would be really neat to have a doctor on your missionary team? Absolutely it would. Not only is he a doctor, he's a historian. He's writing this stuff down. You have the book of Acts today. You have the record of what Paul did because Luke joined the team. Paul's new team would not just have immediate implications, it would have forever implications. We're preaching these stories because God put this team together. So you get the new team. Paul and Silas, Roman citizens. Timothy, Greek father, Jewish mother. Well versed in the scriptures, well spoken of. And you have Luke, the physician and historian. What an all-star team God has placed together. This team is equipped to minister in the unique areas they're going. And you know what? These people stick with Paul. They stay with him. Even into his imprisonment, Paul's still speaking of these people. And what's the result? If you go back to verse 5, you see the result. The churches were strengthened in the faith, and they increased in numbers daily. First Baptist Riverdale, we've had to learn this at our church, at Pillar Church. When we started our process, and again, I don't want to go into huge detail telling stories, but when I came to our church 8 years ago, I knew that we either had to grow where we were or we had to go. And I'm going to tell you, leading a historic Baptist church to sell their building, start over as basically a new church, change their name, I want to tell you, that is a miraculous thing to do. God can only do that. And I knew when we started that process over a year ago, there would be 3 choke points. We have 3 scenes. Remember I talked about those scenes? I knew we would have 3 scenes. Number 1 is when I pitched the vision to do it. I knew we would have a little bit of pushback, but not a lot. I went around to our legacy members. We don't have any charter members left at our church, but we have some that were like 2 weeks later than charter. And I went to their home and I said, look, here's the financial realities. Here's where our church is. And here's what I'm proposing. You know what they did? It was a miracle of God. They said, well, let's do it, Pastor. I went to some of our legacy people that I thought, oh man, they're going to throw me out. But do you know why they didn't throw me out? Do you know why they didn't throw me out? Because those people were there in the beginning. Our church, when it started, met in schools. For 9 years, our church met in schools. They went by Hilltop Baptist Church then. That was a community in Columbus. Went by Hilltop Baptist Church. And they met in schools for 9 years, and they went to like different locations. You know what they did in that time? They started beating the pavement, reaching people for Jesus. And they grew, and they got to the point. 9 years, they were like pilgrims and nomads, meeting in schools, and they built a building. They put it on Briggs Road. They call it Briggs Road Baptist Church. In the beginning of that church, and they changed the name. They had to change the name because they went to a different place. In the first decade of that church, they were mobile. They were scrappy. They met where they had to meet. They reached young families. They changed the name. You know what I did when I pitched this to the church? I got up and I said, we're going back to our roots. We're relaunching. We're reaching young families. We're changing our name. We had a little bit of pushback, but not a lot. And I knew that would be that way. I knew there would be a second choke point. It's when we changed the name. And we did change the name, and we're still a Baptist church. I'm about the most Baptist person I know, but we chose to make Baptist our middle name, and so Pillar Church. We didn't want that to be a barrier. If you'll call it Pillar Baptist Church, that's great. We've Pillar Church. And some people didn't like that. And then I knew that once we started doing things different, because we couldn't just change the name and keep doing the same old stuff, we had to kind of do a different approach. We had to reach our community. We're now in a different community. We're trying to reach those young families again, and we have to shift out of that established church mindset and kind of go back to a new church mindset. And so I had to say, we're not going to do this anymore, but we're going to do this instead. I had people that didn't like that. And at every point, we lost a couple people at the first choke point. We lost a few more at the second. We lost it more at that third. And I knew that's how it would be. Because God's led me there. I'm the shepherd. I knew. I didn't want it to be that way. It's not what I designed it to be. But I knew that this was where God was leading us. And we had to pursue the mission. We had to pursue the mission more than comfort, more than preference, and more than pleasing people. Let me tell you what will kill a church. Pleasing people. Pleasing people. Because here's the thing. What if you listen to, turn on your radio. You like country music. You want to turn it on to a country music station. You like 80s. You turn it on to 80s. Maybe you like the Frank Sinatra classics. You turn it on to whatever. You like different things. Maybe you like rap. You turn it on to a rap station. But if you had a station that said, we want everybody to listen, and if this song would be country, Hank Williams classic country, and then you have a rap song, right? And then you have something from the 80s, then you have soft rock, adult contemporary, like nobody's going to listen to that radio station because that doesn't help anybody. I've seen churches that their goal was to keep everybody happy. And what ends up happening is your church is not pointed in any direction at all. It has no mission. It has no direction. And you know what happens? People who actually want to reach lost people don't want to go to that church. Because the church is no longer about the mission. It's about preferences. I've seen a church. I can take you to it. I can take you to its address. It's almost dead. It's almost gone. There used to be a lot of young people, seminary students even, young preachers that were there. And they slowly left and went other places because the church refused to reach its community. It refused to prioritize the mission. And instead it became about preferences. And they've got exactly what they aimed for. A bunch of half-contented people doing not really anything. You've got to prioritize the mission. Call people to stay. Don't celebrate when people have to separate, but also if people do, you have to be able to say God is sovereign, and He's putting together the people He needs for us to be faithful in this season at this time. Now, let's give the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say. Again, I'm dating myself, aren't I? There's a scene here in this church. Some of you know Paul Harvey, some of you don't remember him. What about old John Mark and Barnabas? Later, toward the end of Paul's ministry, Paul would write some letters. And in Colossians, he would make mention of Mark, the cousin of Barnabas, and he would count him among his fellow workers. In 2 Timothy, he would tell Timothy, the Timothy who's on his team now, to bring Mark to him at prison because he's useful to him for the ministry. In Paul's letter to Philemon, he makes warm remarks about Mark. You just have to trust God. Things are not always as easy as it's just that easy. You have Paul who's prioritizing the mission, and God is blessing it. The church has sanctioned it and sent him out, and God puts together this all-star team for what God is doing. But Barnabas, you know what he does? Barnabas is the encourager. Barnabas is the guy that when Paul was saved, and everybody's like, we don't want anything to do with that guy. He kills Christians. Barnabas was Paul's advocate. Barnabas was Mark's advocate. And in the background, you know what Barnabas is doing? I think he's mentoring Mark. I think he's doing the work. It's not as simple as Barnabas is evil. He hates Jesus. It's not that simple. It's more complex than that. There just arose a point at which Paul and Barnabas had to separate. There was a missiological difference. There was a personal difference. But God still uses Barnabas where he's at, to the point that it comes full circle. And Mark's back on Paul's team. What you have to do is you have to trust God to work at Riverdale. You have to trust God to work up the street. You have to trust God to work in different churches among different pastors and different people, because we are different. Sometimes you've got somebody who's an encourager. Ronnie's a great encourager. Sometimes you've got somebody like me that people either like me or they don't like me, and I don't know why. Maybe I'm more like Paul. I don't know. But it takes everybody in the body of Christ. And we all have different giftings. And even when there's a separation, God's still using Barnabas. He's still using Mark. He's using Paul. So it's not as easy as just looking and saying, oh, those people aren't doing it right. Sometimes you just have to say, this is where God's calling us, and this is where we're going. So let's apply it. And again, I'm preaching things that are true of every church. You know what we got to do? We got to prepare for new phases of mission and ministry. We got to say, Lord, it's 2025. Do I have to download another app? Is that what it takes? I don't know. All right, I'll do it. What's it going to take, Lord? What are you calling us to do? This crazy pastor, what's he want to do? We're going to trust him because we love him. We think he has the mission in mind. Prioritize the mission above distractions and peripheral concerns. Be able to say, what's going to help people know Jesus better? What's going to help us know Jesus better? You're going to come to difficult decisions. There's an expression. Have you ever heard it? If you have to eat a frog, don't stare at it very long. If you have to eat a frog, just get it over with. You're going to have difficult decisions to make, First River Dale. You've already made them. Some of y'all folks have been here for decades. You know what? You've had to have difficult decisions. Sometimes you just got to lean into those and make them. But do it for the sake of the gospel and for Jesus' sake and for the mission's sake. And then trust God to send the right resources, right workers to accomplish his mission here. This is God's church. This is Jesus' church. And he says, on this rock, I'll build my church. It's not our job to build the church. It's Jesus' job. It's our job to be faithful. Thank you. Thank you for letting me preach today, folks.
Stand to your feet if you will. We'll go to the time of response. And I won't be able to come and pray with you if you would like to come forward. Pastor Ray is here. If you come forward, I trust he will pray with you very well. And other than that, please join in with us. If you have your hymnal, you can actually turn. We're just going to sing a verse or two. Page, I don't know if you have it, 249 in the red book if you have it. If not, it should be up here.
All right, just want to mention that the M25 is